Before we begin tonight's stories, remember, every one of them is based on true events. The names, towns, and certain details have been changed for privacy, but what you about to hear really happened. These are real Halloween horror stories, cases of murder, mystery, and tragedy that still haunt the people who lived through them. So turn off the lights, make sure your doors are locked, and let's get into it. If you enjoy true horror stories and real urban legends, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a night of fear. In the small Midwestern town of Ravenbrook, Wisconsin, the streets were lined with jack-o'-lanterns, their grins flickering through the early autumn chill. Kids in ghost sheets and rubber monster masks darted between porches, laughing, their footsteps crunching across fallen leaves. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, and no one ever locked their doors. For 9-year-old Anna Keller, Halloween was the highlight of the year. She'd spent weeks planning her costume, a homemade hobo outfit her mom had helped her piece together from old clothes and face paint. That evening, she'd been allowed to go trick-or-treating alone for the very first time. Her mother reminded her to stay close to Main Street, to be home before 8, and to only knock on doors she recognized. Anna promised she would. She smiled, grabbed her pillowcase, and ran out into the orange-lit night. It was the last time her mother ever saw her alive. Neighbors remembered seeing Anna around 6:30 p.m., walking with a group of friends near Maple Avenue. She'd stopped to Peterson's house, then crossed over to the old farmhouse on the corner of Oak Street, the one that everyone said smelled like motor oil and damp basement. It belonged to Gerald Kane, a 30-something mechanic who'd lived alone since his wife left him years earlier. Gerald was polite, quiet, always waving when neighbors passed, but there was something about him people couldn't quite put their finger on. He didn't decorate for Halloween. His curtains were always drawn. And some nights, when the town slept, you could see him in the garage with the lights on, hammering away at something until dawn. That night, Gerald's porch light was on. And in Ravenbrook, that meant one thing: he was handing out candy. When Anna didn't come home by 8:30, her mom tried not to panic. She assumed her daughter had gotten caught up with friends. But by 9 o'clock, when the other kids had all returned home and Anna still hadn't, she began calling around the neighborhood. No one had seen her since she'd walked toward Oak Street. By 10 o'clock, the streets were empty, the laughter and footsteps gone. Only a few porch lights remained lit, and one of them was Gerald Kane's. When police arrived, they started with the usual checklist. Maybe she got lost. Maybe she wandered off. Maybe she'd gone to a friend's house. But by midnight, every parent in Ravenbrook was outside with flashlights. Combing through yards, ditches, and back alleys, the air grew colder. The pumpkins had begun to burn low, their carved smiles drooping into melted wax. One of the officers, Sergeant Miller, remembered seeing Gerald Kane standing at the end of his driveway, smoking a cigarette and watching the search quietly. When Miller asked if he'd seen Anna, Gerald just shook his head. "No," he said. "Didn't come by here, but there was something off about his tone, too flat, too calm." When the officer offered to take a quick look around his property, Gerald smiled tightly and said, "No need. I've been inside all night." By morning, the town was in panic. Helicopters swept the fields outside town. But nothing, no shoe prints, no clothing, no sign of Anna anywhere. Halloween decorations still hung from porches as days turned into weeks. The orange and black streamers faded, but the fear didn't. Parents began walking their kids to school again. Stranger danger warnings appeared on every radio station. Behind his drawn curtains, Gerald Kane went about his business like nothing had changed. He still drove his pickup to work, still bought coffee from the same diner, still nodded politely when people said hello. But one neighbor noticed something odd. The day after Anna disappeared, Gerald had started burning trash behind his garage. When asked what he was burning, he said, "Old clothes and junk. Cleaning up." The warrant came early that Friday morning. Officers surrounded Gerald Kane's small house on Oak Street as he stood in the doorway, still wearing his grease-stained work shirt. He didn't resist. Inside, the house looked ordinary old furniture, dishes in the sink, a muted TV buzzing in the background. But the deeper they went, the stranger it became. The air smelled faintly of bleach. And in the back hall, near the kitchen, one officer found something that made his blood run cold. Anna's pillowcase. It was empty. Behind the house stood the garage, its door chained shut. Officers cut it open. In one corner, a shallow pit had been dug into the dirt floor, half covered by scrap metal and burned debris. The discovery confirmed what the entire town already feared. Anna Keller wasn't missing. She'd been here all along. News spread through Ravenbrook before noon. People gathered outside the police line in stunned silence, clutching each other, refusing to believe what they were hearing. Halloween decorations still hung limp from porches as if mocking the tragedy. The pumpkins, once glowing symbols of joy, now looked like open mouths screaming in the cold wind. When officers questioned Gerald Kane, he didn't deny it. He didn't cry. He simply said, it was an accident. He told them Anna had come by his house alone, curious about the shiny muscle car parked in his driveway. She wanted to see the engine, he mumbled. So I brought her inside. Just for a minute. He claimed she'd tripped on the slick concrete floor of the garage, hitting her head on a metal tool tray. Panicked, he said, he tried to wake her up. When she didn't respond, fear turned to something darker, something he never fully explained. Detectives noticed his hands trembling when he spoke, his eyes fixed on the table, the word accident falling apart in his throat. One of them leaned forward and asked, if it was an accident, why'd you try to hide her? Gerald said nothing. He just stared at the wall clock, watching the second-hand tick, like he was waiting for it to stop. The detectives didn't believe a word of it. Ravenbrook shut down for days. Reporters from Milwaukee and Chicago descended on the town, asking the same question everyone else was, how could this happen here? Kane's house became a landmark of horror. People drove past just to stare at it. Some claimed to see candlelight flickering in the windows long after the power was shut off. Others said they heard a child's laughter echo from the garage at night. Within a week, the house was condemned and boarded up. No one ever moved in again. When Gerald Kane stood trial months later, he appeared emotionless. The courtroom was silent except for the clack of the stenographer's keys. The evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the town of Ravenbrook never recovered. Parents forbade their children from trick-or-treating for years after that. Every Halloween, someone would leave a single candle on the steps of the old Keller home, a quiet tribute to the little girl who just wanted candy and never came back. Over time, the story turned into legend. New families moved in, unaware of what had happened decades earlier. But every October, people swear they still see a small figure walking down Oak Street at dusk, carrying a pillowcase and humming softly. If you follow her, she disappears at the end of the block, right where Gerald Kane's house once stood. Locals call her the Halloween girl. They say she's not looking for candy anymore. She's looking for the man who took her last one. And if you ever find yourself in Ravenbrook on Halloween night, and you hear a knock long after the trick-or-treaters have gone home, don't open the door. Because they say the Halloween killer still walks those streets, and the next pillowcase he fills might be yours. The town of Clearview, Oregon, was the kind of place where bad things didn't happen. Quiet, scenic, and tucked between the pines, it was mostly known for its vineyards, its hiking trails, and the little strip of boutiques that closed before 9 p.m. That's why when a group of college kids rented a large 2-story home overlooking the valley, no one thought twice. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Nancy Laurel, had listed it on an online rental site. Her ad described it as the perfect mountain getaway for small gatherings. She didn't know that the person booking it, a 22-year-old named Kayla Trent, had other plans. Kayla told Nancy it was for a family reunion. But the moment she got the keys, she texted her friends, "Party's on. Costumes mandatory. Tell everyone." By nightfall, the house at the end of Ridgeview Road was packed. Dozens of cars lined the gravel drive. The air smelled like beer, fog, and wet leaves. Music thumped from inside, lights flickered through the windows, and someone had hung a blood-red banner that read, "Halloween 2K19, no rules." Around 9:30 p.m., a local Uber driver dropped off 2 young men dressed as skeletons. They weren't on the guest list, but no one cared. It was that kind of night faces behind masks, laughter echoing through the trees, strangers blending into the crowd. Kayla barely noticed them. She was busy snapping selfies in the kitchen, surrounded by friends in cheap costumes. But one of her friends, Tanya, later told police that those 2 guys gave her a bad feeling. They didn't talk much, she said. Just stood in the corner, watching. At 10:15, the first noise complaint came in. Neighbors a half-mile down the road called the sheriff's office to report loud music and possible gunfire. The dispatcher logged it as fireworks. At 10:27, a second call came in. This time someone said they heard screaming. Meanwhile, inside the house the energy had shifted. The air felt thick. The fog outside had swallowed the porch lights, and people began leaving in groups. Someone said they saw a fight break out in the living room, near the front door. Someone else said a man in a mask had pulled something from his jacket. The next sound anyone remembered was a pop, sharp, metallic, echoing against the walls. Then another. Then chaos. People screamed, dove for cover, crashed through furniture. The music stopped mid-song. Foam flashlights flickered as bodies scrambled toward the backyard, down the hill, anywhere but inside that house. Sheriff's deputies arrived 8 minutes later. By then, most of the partygoers had fled into the woods or down the road, calling for help. The deputies entered through the kitchen door, stepping over shattered glass and overturned chairs. There were masks everywhere, plastic, rubber, feathers, and in the center of it all, the faint sound of a phone still playing music. They found 2 people unconscious near the staircase, another in the hallway. Witnesses described men in masks, a black SUV, a skull hoodie. The descriptions didn't match. Everyone was terrified. The house became a scene of frozen chaos, half-finished drinks, fake cobwebs, a bowl of untouched candy. But something about it didn't feel random. Detectives found bullet holes in specific places, door frames, corners, the spot near the window where Kayla had been taking photos earlier that night. They believed whoever came there wasn't firing into the crowd blindly. They were aiming. By 2 a.m., news crews had arrived. The town of Clearview, population barely 6,000, was now the center of a national story. The headlines read, "Halloween party turns deadly in quiet mountain town. 5 dead in Airbnb shooting. Masked men vanish into the fog." Locals were shaken. Parents who had let their kids go trick-or-treating that night called them home early. The owner, Nancy Laurel, collapsed when she saw her house on the news. She told reporters through tears, "I rented it for a reunion. I didn't know they were throwing a party. I didn't know." In the days that followed, police combed through hundreds of videos and social media clips from the party. Most were shaky, low light, full of flashing strobes and laughter. But one clip taken just minutes before the shooting showed something strange. At the edge of the dance floor, near the kitchen archway, stood a tall figure in a cracked skull mask. He wasn't dancing. He wasn't drinking. He was just standing still, staring at the camera. When investigators tried to enhance the footage, they noticed something even stranger. Behind him, half hidden by a reflection in the window, was another figure, also masked, also watching. Neither were ever identified. The investigation into the Clearview Halloween shooting lasted months. Detectives from 3 counties worked together, piecing together hundreds of interviews, phone records, and online posts. But the case refused to come together cleanly. The surviving guests all remembered something different. Some said there were 2 masked men, others swore there were 3. A few insisted they saw the shooter arrive in a black SUV, while one witness claimed he'd been in the house long before the party started. There were no fingerprints, no confirmed identities, no shell casings that matched any known weapon in the state database. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: the shooter or shooters knew the house. They'd moved through it like they'd been there before. Then came a lead. A week after the attack, police located the black SUV abandoned in a field 12 miles out of town. Inside were 2 Halloween masks, both splattered with something dark. Both melted around the edges, like someone had tried to burn them. In the glove compartment, they found a prepaid cell phone. Its memory card had been removed, but the call log still showed one number, dialed repeatedly the night of the shooting. It belonged to Nancy Laurel, the homeowner. When questioned again, Nancy looked confused. She insisted she'd had no contact with anyone that night. "I was home watching the news," she said. But phone records didn't lie. Detectives eventually learned that Nancy's teenage son, Ely, had been living with her part-time, and Dee used her account to message people about private parties at the rental house. Eli denied everything, saying the messages were just jokes, but the investigators didn't think so. According to testimony from one of Kayla's friends, Eli had been at the party earlier that night. He'd been seen arguing with Kayla in the kitchen, angry that Dee invited too many people, angry that it wasn't supposed to be like this. That was around 9:45 p.m. 20 minutes later. The shooting began. Police never proved Eli fired a gun, but after a month of searching, he vanished. His phone went dark, his car abandoned near the state line. For months, the case dragged on without closure. No arrests, no confessions, only rumors. The people of Clearview moved on, or at least pretended to. Nancy sold the house quietly in early 2020. The new owners renovated it, stripped the floors, painted the walls, and rebranded it as Ridgeview Retreat. But word got around, and the bookings stopped almost immediately. Guests complained about strange noises, cold spots, the sound of music echoing faintly from the basement at night. One reviewer posted online, "We stayed there for 2 nights. Around 3 a.m., we heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs, but we were the only guests. Then we heard laughter muffled, like it was coming through the walls. When I turned on my phone flashlight, all the mirrors were fogged up from the inside." The listing was removed 3 months later. Today, the house still stands, hidden behind overgrown pines, its windows boarded and driveway chained off. Locals call it the Ridgeview House. Every Halloween, kids from Clearview High dare each other to walk up the gravel path and knock on the front door. Most don't make it halfway. Those who do swear they hear faint music playing from inside, an old party mix looping forever. Some even say that if you listen long enough, you can hear a voice whisper from the dark porch, "Party's not over yet." A former deputy once said that the security footage from that night, the one showing the masked figure staring into the camera, wasn't to the last frame on the file. He claimed that when the clip was enhanced for evidence, a reflection appeared behind the man's mask. It wasn't another person. It was the faint outline of the house itself on fire, like a flash forward of what was coming. But that couldn't be true. That part never made it into the report. Still, every Halloween the people of Clearview remember. They light candles on their porches and turn off the music early. And they say if you ever find yourself driving down Ridgeview Road after dark, you'll see flashing lights through the trees, blue, red, white like the night of the massacre, repeating itself over and over again. Only there are no cars there anymore. Just the empty house. And the music still playing. For as long as anyone in Millfield, Ohio, could remember, Halloween had been sacred. The streets filled with children in plastic masks, pillowcases swung full of candy, and the smell of pumpkin candles hung thick in the crisp air. But in 1978, that all changed. That year, the town learned that the scariest monsters weren't the ones wearing costumes, they were the ones handing out the candy. It began with a man named Harold Benton, a quiet 42-year-old who lived alone on the edge of town. He worked at the local hardware store, drove an old beige Ford, and never said much beyond small talk. Most people thought he was harmless, just lonely. Harold's house looked like any other on Maple Avenue, though kids whispered about it being creepy. His front yard was cluttered with old tools, rusted bikes, and a single jack-o'-lantern with its candle burned down to waxy tears. Every Halloween he handed out full-sized chocolate bars. That's how people remembered him, the cool neighbor who gave the best candy. That year, October 31st, 1978, was colder than usual. The streets glowed orange with decorations, and families poured out of their homes to join the trick-or-treating rush. Among them was the Parsons family, a young couple, Mark and Denise, and their 2 kids, 10-year-old Emma and her little brother, Josh. Emma dressed as a witch, Josh as a vampire, his plastic fangs barely staying in. Their route was always the same. Start at the school, loop around Elm Street, then finish near Maple Avenue, where Harold Benton's house waited at the end of the block. By 8 p.m., their bags were heavy. They were laughing, running up porches, shouting trick or treat. When they finally reached Harold's house, he answered the door slowly, the light from inside spilling over his glasses. He smiled faintly, holding a large silver bowl. "Happy Halloween," he said, his voice raspy. The kids cheered as he dropped a bar into each bag. But as Emma turned to leave, Harold said something strange. He leaned down slightly and whispered, "Be careful with that one." "It's a little sharp," Emma giggled, thinking he was joking. She thanked him and ran off to catch her brother. Hours later, the Parsons family returned home. They dumped their candy onto the carpet, sorting through the piles. Chocolate here, lollipops there. Their dad joked about the parent tax, stealing a few mini Snickers. Then Emma picked up the full-sized chocolate bar from Harold's house. It was slightly opened at one end, just enough to see the foil inside. Her mom frowned. "Honey, don't eat that one yet. Looks like someone already opened it." Emma protested. "No, it's fine." He just gave it to me like that, but Denise's face went pale as she peeled back the wrapper. Inside, buried beneath a thin layer of chocolate, was the glint of metal, a razor blade. Mark called the police immediately. Within 30 minutes, 2 patrol cars were parked outside their house. The officers collected the candy bar, sealed it in a plastic evidence bag, and began knocking on doors along Maple Avenue. By midnight, the entire town knew. The news spread faster than the sirens. Someone was putting blades in Halloween candy. Parents snatched bags from their children, dumping them into sinks, cutting them open one by one. Some found nothing unusual. But one family, 2 blocks away, reported finding a sewing needle inside a caramel chew. The police had no choice but to issue a public warning. By dawn, the story was on the radio. Authorities in Millfield urged parents to inspect all Halloween candy after a suspected tampering incident. The rumor mill spun out of control. People said a cult was behind it. Others said it was a prank gone wrong. But the name on everyone's lips was the same: Harold Benton. When officers arrived at his house the next morning, they found the front door unlocked. The candy bowl was still sitting by the door, half full. On the counter, a pile of empty wrappers, all the same brand as Emma's bar. Harold wasn't home. His car was gone, his bed untouched, and his back door left wide open, leading into the woods. They searched the area for hours, but there was no sign of him. That night, a deputy checking the edge of the nearby river found a beige Ford parked near the bank. The driver's door was open, the keys still in the ignition. Inside, on the passenger seat, lay a grocery bag filled with candy bars, each one partially opened, each containing something sharp inside: blades, pins, shards of glass. There was no sign of Harold, but written on the fogged-up windshield, traced by a finger from the inside, were the words, "Trick or treat." The search for Harold Benton stretched into the second week of November. Dozens of volunteers combed through the forests and creek beds surrounding Millfield. The leaves had turned to ash-gray slush, and the air carried that faint smell of rot that only late autumn brings. Officers found tracks in the mud near the riverbank, one set leading down, none coming back up. Divers were called in the next morning. They recovered nothing. The theory was that Harold had driven out there after realizing the police were onto him, panicked, and slipped into the water. The current was fast that week. If his body went under, it could have been miles downstream by morning. Still, some people refused to believe he was dead. A few locals claimed they'd seen his silhouette at night standing at the edge of the tree line near his old house, a flashlight beam flickering like a dying heartbeat. Others said they found candy wrappers scattered on their lawns, slit open cleanly down the middle. The investigation confirmed what everyone feared: the blades were real. Each candy bar had been carefully unwrapped, tampered with, and resealed with a thin strip of clear adhesive, the kind you could only buy at hardware stores. When police checked Harold's workplace, they found a roll of it in his locker. What they didn't find was a motive. He had no criminal record, no known grudges, no close family. His neighbors described him as quiet, strange, the kind of man who talked to himself. The only odd detail came from a coworker who mentioned that Harold had once been caught giving out homemade candy years earlier, peanut clusters wrapped in foil. When a parent complained, the police gave him a warning and moved on. No one thought much of it at the time. By Thanksgiving, the case was officially closed. The sheriff declared Harold Benton presumed dead. The townspeople tried to move on, but something had changed. For the first time in Millfield's history, Halloween was canceled the next year. No porch lights, no costumes, no laughter echoing through the streets. Just silence and the memory of what happened. Parents started buying sealed candy in bulk and checking every piece their children brought home. Some even x-rayed the bags at the local clinic. The rumor spread beyond Millfield, carried by newspapers and TV anchors. Beware of tampered Halloween candy? Within a few years, the story had gone national. But Millfield never forgot the details that didn't make the headlines. Like the mailman who swore he saw Harold's mailbox stuffed with fresh candy wrappers every October. Or the new owners of his house who said that every Halloween night, no matter how many times they cleared the porch, a single chocolate bar would appear on the steps half open, glinting under the porch light. One year, a curious teenager picked it up. He later told friends that when he peeled it open, the wrapper inside wasn't silver foil. It was lined with rusted metal shavings. He dropped it instantly. When he looked again, the candy bar was gone. Decades later, the legend of Harold Benton lives on in Millfield. Parents tell their children the story every October as a warning. Never eat anything that isn't sealed. Never trust the quiet house at the end of the street. And if anyone ever tells you, be careful, it's a little sharp, you walk away. Because they say that on Halloween night, when the fog rolls over Maple Avenue, you can still see a figure standing by the edge of the old Benton house. A man in glasses, holding a candy bowl, smiling faintly as he whispers to passing children, trick or treat. In the fall of 1959, the little town of Ridgeway, Illinois, looked like a postcard from a safer time. Pumpkins sat on porches, radio shows crackled through open windows, and kids practiced their trick or treat in the mirror. It was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors because everyone knew everyone. That Halloween, 17-year-old Evelyn Parker was babysitting for the Andersons, a quiet couple who lived on the edge of town. They had 2 children, Tommy, 7, and Lisa, 5. The Andersons were headed to a costume party downtown. Evelyn was to put the kids to bed by 9 p.m. and stay until they got back around midnight. She'd babysat for them before. It was easy money. The house was neat and calm, the kids polite. The only thing she didn't like was the way the wind moaned through the trees outside, making the old windows rattle. At 7:45, she turned on the radio in the living room, some light music and a Halloween safety segment. Tommy was still in his cowboy costume, pretending to lasso the couch. Lisa was half asleep with a lollipop in her hand. By 8:30, both kids were tucked in upstairs. Evelyn switched off the hall light and came back down, curling up on the sofa with a magazine. The night felt ordinary until the phone rang. She jumped a little. It wasn't uncommon for the Andersons to check in, but when she answered, no one spoke. "Hello?" she said again. Static. Then a faint click. She shrugged it off. Wrong number, maybe. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, a man's voice whispered, slow and raspy, "Have you checked the children?" Evelyn froze. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to sound calm. The line went dead. She stared at the receiver, her pulse quickening. After a few seconds, she told herself it was a prank. Teenagers, probably half the boys in school, knew she babysat for the Andersons. She locked the front door just in case and returned to the couch. At 9:40, another call. The same voice, this time louder. "Why haven't you checked the children?" She slammed the phone down, her hands shaking. The house suddenly felt too big, too quiet. She could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, the faint whistle of wind through the chimney. Evelyn tried to call the Andersons, but the line was busy. Then she called the police. "Probably just a prank call," the operator said kindly. "Keep the doors locked. If he calls again, stay on the line, we can trace it." She nodded, gripping the receiver like it could save her. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. She answered and heard heavy breathing. The voice whispered, almost amused now, "You should go upstairs." Evelyn's throat went dry. "What do you want?" she whispered. A pause. Then, "I want to see them." The line clicked dead. Her hands trembled as she hung up. She turned off the radio and listened. The whole house was still except for a faint sound from upstairs. A floorboard creaked. "Tommy?" she called out. "Lisa?" No answer. The hallway stretched long and dim, moonlight spilling in through the curtains. When she reached the children's room, the door was cracked open. Inside, both kids were asleep, safe, untouched. Relieved, she turned to leave, then noticed something that didn't belong, the window. She shut it quickly, locked it, and whispered to herself, "It's just the wind." Just the wind. Evelyn hesitated before answering the phone. Her hand hovered over the receiver, her breath trembling in her chest. Finally, she picked it up. "Hello? You shouldn't have gone upstairs." Evelyn's blood ran cold. Her voice shook. "What do you want from me?" "I've been watching you all night." She dropped the phone and stumbled backward, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might faint. This wasn't a prank anymore. She ran to the window and peered out. The street looked quiet. Just the faint orange glow of jack-o'-lanterns and the wind rustling piles of leaves. She grabbed the phone again, dialed the operator with shaking fingers. "It's me again," she whispered. "He called. He's threatening me, please, you have to trace it." The operator's voice came through, steady but urgent. "Stay on the line as long as you can. Don't hang up until we say so." Evelyn nodded silently, clutching the receiver to her ear as the line hummed in her hand. Seconds turned to minutes. Every tick of the clock felt like thunder. Then, a click. The man was back. "You're prettier when you're scared." Evelyn couldn't speak. She was paralyzed. "They're sleeping so peacefully," the man whispered. "Don't wake them." The line went dead. Evelyn started screaming. Within moments, the phone rang again. This time it was the operator. "Miss Parker," the woman said quickly. "Get out of the house, right now." "The call is coming from inside the house." Evelyn froze. She bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, screaming for help. She didn't even grab her coat, she just ran into the cold October night, her bare feet slapping against the porch steps. A police car screeched into the driveway less than 2 minutes later. Officer Ray Dutton jumped out and rushed inside, gun drawn. He found the upstairs extension phone hanging off the hook in the hallway. Then in the children's room, he found the window open again. And next to the bed, hidden behind the heavy curtains, was a man. Later identified as Charles Heller, a 32-year-old drifter who'd escaped from a state psychiatric facility 2 months earlier. He'd been living in abandoned homes across Ridgeway, sneaking into houses for food. He told officers he had been watching the Parker babysitter for weeks. He hadn't planned to kill anyone, he claimed. He just wanted to see the kids sleeping. When police searched the room, they found a knife on the windowsill and smudged fingerprints on the bedpost right beside where little Tommy's head had been resting. Evelyn never babysat again. The Andersons moved out of Ridgeway within months. And in the years that followed, parents across America told the same story, each with slightly different details. A babysitter alone. Strange phone calls. A man inside the house. No one could ever prove the exact truth of that night. But every Halloween after 1959, parents began teaching their kids one simple rule. Always check the children. Halloween night, 2011. The town of Maple Grove, Pennsylvania looked like something out of a horror movie. Orange lights twinkled along every porch, fake cobwebs tangled the fences, and the crisp air carried the smell of pumpkin spice and cold leaves. But on Sycamore Street, one house stood out more than the rest. It wasn't because of the decorations, though, they were elaborate. It was because of the body hanging from the tree. At first, no one thought much of it. It looked fake. A prop, maybe even a bit too realistic, but this was Halloween. People went all out. Children laughed as they passed, parents complimented the amazing setup, and neighbors took pictures for social media. No one realized what they were looking at was real. The house belonged to Eleanor Higgins, a 64-year-old widow known for her love of Halloween. Every year she filled her yard with ghosts, skeletons, and fog machines. But this year, she'd been quieter. Her husband had passed away the winter before, and she hadn't spoken much to anyone since. When neighbors saw the figure hanging from the maple tree in her front yard, they assumed she'd put it up herself. "Creepy old lady still got it," one teen joked as they passed. The truth wouldn't come out until the next morning. At 6:42 a.m., Officer Daniel Ross received a call from a mail carrier. He reported a possible suicide on Sycamore Street. When Ross arrived, he immediately noticed something the neighbors had missed: the smell. The body wasn't made of rubber or latex. It was a human being. A woman dressed in what looked like a witch costume, her body swaying slightly in the breeze. When he looked closer, his stomach turned. The face was pale and sunken, and the eyes half open. It wasn't a decoration at all. The front door was unlocked. The decorations were scattered, unfinished. A half-carved pumpkin still sat on the table beside a cup of cold coffee. In the living room, the TV played a static-filled news broadcast. And on the wall, written in red paint or something like it, was a single word: "Look." Next to the word was a photo. A Polaroid. It showed Eleanor, smiling, holding a candy bowl. Behind her, in the window reflection, was a man's face. The autopsy later confirmed that Eleanor had died between 8 and 9 p.m. on Halloween night. She'd been strangled. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. Nothing was stolen. Police suspected someone she knew, maybe a friend, or one of the neighborhood teens she'd always given candy to. But no one came forward. And the face in the photo didn't match anyone in the area. The investigation into Eleanor Higgins' death quickly turned into one of the strangest cases Maple Grove had ever seen. Neighbors were shocked. Some even refused to believe it at first. They'd all walked past her house that night, laughing, taking pictures, even letting their kids touch the decoration, and all that time, Eleanor was hanging there, her real body mistaken for a prop. Detectives canvassed the street, going door to door. That's when they found something unusual. Across from Eleanor's home, At 41 Sycamore, a college student named Ben Miller had set up a doorbell camera to record trick-or-treaters for his vlog. When police asked for his footage, Ben hesitated. "It's weird," he said. "You should just see it." The footage began around 6:30 p.m. Halloween night. You could see kids running up and down the street, dressed as superheroes and monsters, their laughter echoing. Eleanor's porch light was on. Everything looked normal. Then, around 7:04 p.m., the camera caught a man walking up her driveway. He wasn't wearing a costume. Just dark jeans, a hoodie, and a mask, not a Halloween mask, but something homemade. Like a white plastic bag tied around his face with holes cut out for eyes. He stood at her door for several seconds, motionless. Then the door opened. Eleanor stepped out, holding her candy bowl, smiling. The man didn't move. Then suddenly he lunged. The camera cut to static for a moment. Maybe the porch light flickered, maybe it was interference. But when it came back, the man was dragging something down the front steps. Detectives enhanced the footage frame by frame. The quality wasn't great, but you could make out his shoes, black work boots, mud-caked. The same tread pattern was later found in Eleanor's living room. But there was something else too. At the very end of the clip, as the man disappeared into the shadows, he turned to face the camera. Even with the mask, you could see it. He knew he was being watched, and he raised his hand ... and waved. The case spread across Pennsylvania news for weeks, then across the country. Reporters dubbed him the Halloween Phantom, but no arrest was ever made. The man's face was never identified. The mask was never recovered, and the case quietly went cold by the following year. Then, in 2017, 6 years later, a new family moved into Eleanor's old home, a couple with a 9-year-old son. They renovated the place, painted the walls, replaced the windows. One day, while cleaning the attic, they found a box tucked behind the insulation. Inside were photos. Dozens of Polaroids, all of trick-or-treaters from Halloween night, 2011. Each picture showed a different child at Eleanor's front door, and in every single photo behind the kids, standing in the shadows of the doorway, was the man in the mask. Police reopened the investigation, but the trail was cold. The prints on the photos were too degraded to match, and the old camera he used was never found. To this day, every Halloween in Maple Grove, some locals swear they still see a man in a white mask wandering Sycamore Street just after dark, standing near the tree where Eleanor once hung. He never speaks. He just watches and waves.